get ready to throw down.
All right. Welcome, everybody. We're having some technical issues, so unfortunately we can't push this live to Facebook, which will be fixed before next week. But the Zoom information is out there. You should have it. So if you want to hop in. This is here. It'll also be dripped out later. So what's going on this week, everybody? I closed a couple of deals of business, and I'm feeling pretty good about it.
Congratulations. Good job.
Thank you. Take them both. Put out a pretty big offer into my network and said, hey, like, I am willing to do this if people have it. And, you know, some people came out and been having some good conversations. I've been doing a lot of my actual kind of discovery on Messenger. So that's like chatty, and then moving it as late as possible to a phone call for the presentation. And that's been working pretty well for me. But it's me having to adjust down to selling to people who are, you know, younger than I am, right? Which is important because most of my market is younger than I am. So they want to let it live in Messenger and via chat and everything else like this. So I'm allowing that to happen, and then taking a break at some point in the conversation saying like, hey, I got to go. Let's come back to this tomorrow. Can we hop on a call? And that's been working for me pretty well. What about for you guys?
So for me, Nanette, the surgeries have started, so I'm really excited. So I've seen a lot of, you know, it's kind of like I'm going back and getting all organized.
Can you stop chewing the chips, please, Al?
My apologies, guys.
No,
I don't know what y'all can hear
here.
again. I'm the old guy of the group. Shit, sorry.
Nanette, I'm
sorry.
sorry.
No, that's right. So I think
apologies.
we should share what Clint said earlier before we started recording. So Al is the person, Clint said this, Al is the person on the plane eating.
No, I'm not.
You opened up the can of salmon. And that is so true.
I am not. No. My apologies if you guys were hearing too much of my crunch. I'm starving, and anyway.
So
yeah.
So are hospitals like back to normal as far as like getting into the OR? Has anything changed as far as the process or anything else?
I don't think we're totally back to complete normal, but
okay.
It's started up.
Excuse me. They put in a bunch of extra, like where the reps are not to be in the room. They got to be out waiting to be called in, which I don't think it's really going to work well. And it's hospital to hospital. So the initial knee-jerk reaction is to set up all these parameters because we're doing it right. But doing it right, unfortunately, you get it on one end, but you suffer on the other, because we need to be in there immediately because you got somebody that if you hit a vein or an artery and you're bleeding and something doesn't work, and it's just mass confusion sometimes. So you have to be there right there to say, hey, don't do that, do this. So you can't, 5 minutes into the room, you've got a live patient that has a big old gash in their back that you're trying to put nuts, bolts, and screws in. So it doesn't work on all these surgeries. And I think there's some grumblings about needing to modify some of that. But other than that, patients are lining up. You know, patients' healthcare, their situations haven't changed drastically with COVID. They haven't gotten any healthier or any better. So, you know, they just had to wait a little longer for these elective surgeries.
So are you focused on kind of nurturing the existing relationships, or are you really focused on generating new relationships right now?
No, nurturing the existing relationships, because those pipelines were already set to go. From the clinical standpoint, we saw over 100 patients yesterday at the offices. So our volume has ramped up because other offices were closed. They haven't really come back online, and not across the board. I mean, a lot of them have come back, but we're finding more and more that just are on limited number of access. They're not taking on new patients. Some of these people are staying status quo. Well, that's brought us more business in the clinical side of things.
Interesting. What about for you, Clint? What are you working on this week?
I mean, we closed a few big deals that have been in the balance for, 3-4 months, and they'll really carry us through in our backlog. So, surprisingly right now, I'm double the backlog that I projected on the regular year before COVID. So our backlog's great. Mm-hmm. And we're killing it there. Getting the projects going and started and bringing revenue in the door is the issue, right? Because everybody's still just not really sure what to do. with this whole deal. So, I think coming out of this, we're looking good, looking ahead of schedule. But I'm ready for it to just be over so we can all, get back to business. And, and in this state, at least, we're, in Texas, it's reopening faster than most. So
yeah.
I'm a little excited.
So does everything hit backlog, or do certain projects not hit backlog and they fall into some other category for you?
Yeah, we've got a few. I mean, some of them are, bid them and start tomorrow. So, obviously those go straight into the revenue stream. But yeah, from, most cases, most of your stuff is a backlog, at least, 4 to 5 weeks.
Okay.
So
And
some of those jobs, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. Go ahead, Clint.
Yeah, some of those jobs, you're talking about a 1.5 to 2 year final closeout. So, you're talking backlog going into maybe even 2022 at this point. Some of that, maybe it's only $500,000, but at least you got the doors open in 2022.
Absolutely.
Clint brought up a point where he said, we tend to be opening a little quicker in this area, meaning, state of Texas. But I have some concerns because we had our first patient put on a ventilator this week, and she was a cancer patient, so she had some comorbidities. We also have seen more positive tests. We've got people that are quarantining for 14 days because they just tested positive. And we're getting the antibody tests, 250 of them next week, so we can do the blood and determine whether you have antibodies or antigens built up against it. And we have a lot of people. I'm still thinking we've got to have more testing out there. People need to know where they stand. And if it's testing every day before you go, to the mall or to your job, I mean, this is such an easy. If we would just put all our efforts into understanding where this virus lives and who's it in, I think people will self-quarantine. We've had nobody say, screw it, I'm just going to go infect everybody. But there's a lot of doubt, and we've had limited capabilities of being able to give people answers. So I think it's all about information. And I hate that the economy's shut down. Hell, I'm a small business guy. It won't take much to put me out of business. Yeah, we've been fortunate. But I want the state open. And I think there are a lot of healthy people out there that just need to know, do I have the antigens? And even if you do, there's the precaution of, we're not sure what next season looks like, but you seem to be doing okay now. I don't know. That's my biggest frustration with running a business and dealing with COVID-19 right now.
Yeah, I'm kind of in that same boat because my day-to-day hasn't really changed terribly much, right? So I am not in that group, the people that have to go out and, drive to work or, are essential. And so they're out there and around and everything else like this. So fairly lucky in that instance. But, I'm also concerned, right? Because as of now, our state's back open, right? So, I'm getting hit up from, like my jiu-jitsu school, like, hey, when are you coming back? It's like, yeah, probably June, and the guy who cuts my hair is like trying to get me on board for an appointment. And I'm like, I'm just letting this thing grow. Right.
Yeah. We can see that.
He figures he's got at least good 6 months worth of work out of you.
Well, here's the dilemma. When you get back, that first haircut's a whooping on him, man. He's like, It's like trimming trees. If you stay on top of it, you just snip instead of.
Well,
that's like cutting the toenails on Dumb and Dumber with the grinder.
Well, I hired a lawn care service at as soon as grass started growing again, and they came out and they charged me double because the grass was too long. So hopefully that doesn't happen when I go back to the barber.
Dude,
that's who you need to cut your hair.
Yeah, they have the same tools, and the way that thing's growing, man, that's more like a bush than a head of hair.
So yeah,
hey, I do have something I'm curious about with you guys and your businesses. Have you guys seen personalities really flare? Because we used to talk about that a lot in the beginning of our podcast. Was when you get stressed out and you get to that corner, your real personality flares, and I'm noticing that a lot, even just in my coworkers, my customers. even in myself, you know, you feel a little, your back's against the wall, so your true personalities are coming out. And I think it's a good reveal, you know, to be honest with you.
Right. Right.
Yeah. I mean, I can't speak for everybody else, but I have retreated pretty harshly into like critical, you know, Vulcan mindsets of just like data and facts. And partially it's just like a bandwidth issue because, you know, with everything that's going on, like what do you trust in the news and who do you trust for information and stuff like that? And seeing all these, some people. So
I knew you would.
But like some people are pulling up these like data points that are just like ridiculous. And I'm like, have you ever done like an actual like experiment or done anything with like some actual data to it? Because, you know, finding one case in a haystack is not indicative of, you know, a conspiracy or anything else like this. It means that someone maybe made a mistake. So like, are you mad because like there's cause, or are you mad just to be mad kind of deal? And so that's kind of pushed me back into more of like facts and figures and logic, but then also just not knowing, right? Like, what do I have control over, right? I have control over facts and figures and logic and expectations. So let's go back to that stuff. I don't really know that it's serving me very well, but I feel better.
I see some of it, you know, in my staff. But we've kept that to a minimum because we've said, hey, look, you have your job. You have something to be thankful for, right? This could be harder on us. We're in an industry that will potentially survive better than most. So we've preset to our staff. But, you know, I have, you know, reaching out to other business owners and other colleagues. I think if you felt any little bit of disenfranchised in your career, in your social life, in any of these different arenas, this has compounded that, right? If you weren't really doing as well as what the economy was projecting, right? Because we're on this big rocket to the sky and everything was going great, but that doesn't mean everybody's business was going great, right? So if you had any kind of struggles in a really good environment, maybe you made some bad choices, maybe you spent too much money or whatever it may be, this then compounds what you are already feeling, right?
Absolutely.
And then stack on top of it that, you know, we've got, you know, close to 30 million people that literally got furloughed, laid off, that don't have any real, and here's what happens every time, guys, I'm going to tell you, because I've been through this. We learn as business owners to do more with less.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then labor
that's
becomes
what we're
cheap.
doing too.
And then labor becomes cheap, meaning I can hire a guy because he will work for less because he does not have a job. He has all the qualifications. So now you got more people than you have jobs. What happens then? It's supply and demand, just like everything else.
Yeah.
And that's frustrating. And I completely understand it, but I can, you know, it's easy to define as well.
So I'm curious for you, Clint. I mean, being a D and then also being, you know, a leader of a sales team, you know, we've kind of talked in the past about how some of that doesn't always, that the deaness kind of has to soften up sometimes so that you can be nurturing and like actually there and help, as opposed to just screw you, I'm going to run with the ball. Like, are you having to fight that in yourself right now?
No, I think of all times that you know, we say D up a little bit, but this is kind of a time where you've got to make some hard decisions of, we can't chase that right now. We don't have the bandwidth. Like, you've got to drop that deal. Whereas, you know, 3-4 months ago, you could be a little more compassionate and understanding, hey, you know, we've got people not doing anything, so we can just do that as a trial, or we can kind of go on a fishing expedition in that market. And you can't do that right now. At least we can't, you know. So it's really getting down to, you know, when people want to do something versus have to do something, somebody's got to be there to kind of make that decision. So I'm not really fighting it that much, but I will tell you that, you know, the personality flares from everybody is a little more, I see a lot more compassion from everybody from all walks of life. You know, everybody's going through the same thing. You know, this isn't like it's a, you know, this market's good and that market's bad, and I'm in the good one and you're in the bad one, so I don't have any compassion for you. Everybody's in the same economy. Everybody's in the same crisis. So I see a lot more compassion in everybody.
Gosh, I hope so.
And so,
Well,
But I think that'll go away soon. I
Yeah.
think that once it flips, you're gonna go right back to maybe even worse than it was, right? Because people are gonna be really hungry and take advantage.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen the same thing, Clint, and I know Nan and I have spoke about this. Is there's more. Hey, how are you doing? With the real emphasis on how are you doing? I am concerned, and so that statement means a little bit more these days because some people are struggling, and particularly if you're not struggling, you're still way concerned about your well-being. How long can you survive? What happens if next week, numbers start to go down, or I start to lose some traction on my end? Because it's incredibly difficult to go gain traction in these markets. It's just not there. And
Sure.
so you're clutching on to what little you have, hoping that it doesn't go away. Man, it's a hard place to be at.
Yeah, and so some of pre-qualifying questions that we give to our customers, and even our customers give back to us is, before we give you this job, how are you guys, what's your manpower? Where are you guys at? How busy are you when this project's going on if we give this to you? And, before those were checking the box questions that they had to do to get on paper, to get on record. So if you failed, they had that to fall back on. And now it's a little more, like you were saying, Doc, you really feel it in there. It's like, hey, I'm really concerned about you guys because you guys did have to downgrade. You guys don't have the manpower that you used to once have. And can you do this job? And if you can, let's talk about that. And if you can't, let's talk about that too. So there's a little bit more open-ended questioning now, with real answers than there was 3 months ago.
Interesting. Nan,
and I'm seeing some of that. So yeah.
With what's going on with your stuff, like, is it harder to remain attentive and have relevant conversations with these surgeons whenever you can't go into the OR?
No. So the entire time that we've been in this situation, it's just been via text message, a few phone calls. So it's not like there's been a lot of one-on-one conversation, in front of each other, which is fine. But what it has made me look at is I need to really get out there and build more relationships like that, because if this does happen again, I don't want to be in the circumstance of I only have a few people that I can reach out at that level. So I really want to get it. And when we were talking about, when you were talking about just different personalities, the subject that Clint brought up, I was thinking, being an S, I really like when we have, everybody's symbiotic relationships. Well, I just think this whole thing has escalated the whole, I hate to bring it up, but the whole Republican, Democrat, the whole, and again, being an S, I would like to have everyone be symbiotic and try to figure out how to heal this whole situation. But I think the proclivity for everyone is to jump on when they think they're right. I mean, across the board, people have one opinion now, even stronger. Nobody's really going, okay, well, let's try to figure out how to work. I mean, I think people want to feel that way, but when you get nervous about a situation, I think it draws you to defense, and I've seen a lot of that. So I'm really trying to just step back, even with some of my white knights that I'll be talking to them, and they'll bring up something. I'm like, okay, step back. It is about choices of you have to choose sometimes to just keep your mouth shut, and, I've talked about that a lot. Don't go in there and just think you have to win the situation. Just go, okay, I understand how you feel. And sometimes you shouldn't even say that. I think a lot of times I preach this all the time. A lot of times just hold your tongue, because people are really defensive right now. I think what everyone was saying, when you get nervous about your job, what's going on in the government, what's going on. I mean, people get nervous and get a little riled up, and you do. I think an S is always going to be a little bit better off because, you're not trying to be the I and go, hey, or be the D and go, this is the way it is, or be the C and say, I have I've got the answers. I've got the facts. Well, that's your facts. Everybody has a different fact.
Yeah.
And I know Al might argue with that, maybe even Clint, but I think you have to be respectful of other people's opinions, especially when things are difficult.
To that point, man, you talked a lot about DISC, and so have I, and the rest of us have talked a lot. John, will you give kind of a quick rundown for people that maybe haven't joined us from the beginning? Can you give a quick DISC rundown just so everybody knows what DIS&C is?
Yeah, that's good. I like that.
Absolutely. So we sit on the 4 different quadrants of this. So Clint is our D. D stands for dominant. They are really great at accomplishing tasks. They are not very people driven. They're going to lead with their gut. So you see these people tend to be entrepreneurs, C-suite executives and things like that, because they're very good at making decisions and have a history of making good decisions. Al is our I, which stands for influencer. These people are more people driven than Clint is, excuse me. So, rapport, getting along with people, influential, they need to be the center of attention. They have their stories, and they also don't really love conflict. Clint loves conflict. Most Ds do because they just don't care. I's, because they're people driven, don't like conflict as much. Now, Al does a really good job of being able to shift more towards that D side because he's been an owner for so long. But Al in party mode is straight up I. Straight up I. We have Nanette, who's our S. S stands for steady motivator, steady relator, and essentially they are people driven like the I, but they are not going to be gut driven like the I is, right? I's and D's are gut driven. S's and C's are going to be fact driven. So what that means is they don't like conflict. They're not going to get into big heated conflicts over opinions, which is kind of what we heard Nan just talking about a moment ago. And they want everybody to get along. And then you have me, I'm a C, right? So C's are very focused on facts, logic. It has to make sense. Let's dig into all of this stuff, very clear expectations. And so what we see is when you're not under any pressure, you can move pretty fluidly between these states, at least once you kind of have an idea of where they are and where you hang out normally and stuff like that. But under pressure, we kind of retreat back to our entrenched positions, right, of data for me, decision-making for Clint, and some of that for Al. But Al's, when you look at an I who doesn't have as much D in them as Al does, they're normally very attached to any shiny thing, right? They're not super focused. They're not really historically great at doing the day-to-day. This is not meant to be bad. We all have our
No, I was going to say, yeah, the key to some of this that John's talking about, though, is being able to reach out and get a C to help you in some of the weaker areas, having an S, having a D. So when you surround yourselves and because if it was a room full of I's, we'd be screwed. So in my group, and I'm sure Clint and Nan and John can all speak to this, we have people who help shore up our deficiencies, and we are not so entrenched in who we are to not be able to slide. And that's part of this, is being able to slide away from what your natural tendencies are, being self-aware, and having to, like Clint says, having to man up sometimes. Sometimes I have to handle conflict inside my business world, and I don't like doing it. It's probably my least favorite thing to do, but I do go do it. And at the end, I try to make it a win-win situation instead of a scorched earth, so I have my own spin on those particular, uncomfortable events that I have to handle.
So real quick, let's talk about a conversation that I had this week with someone who wanted to sell me something for our show, right? And the conversation was good. I see some utility in what he does, and I think it could help us. But towards the end of it, he started trying to insert his agenda over my agenda. Well, let's just get everybody on a call and let's just talk through this. And I'm like, first of all, getting all three of us here for any meeting is hard enough. So if you don't want to play ball and talk to me, and then I'm sorry, all four of us, I'm getting corrected off screen here. So I was like, no, I set the expectation up front. I'm collecting this information. I will share it with them. If there's value here, then we will kind of take that next step. But whenever he started trying to override my process, that doesn't really work when you're selling to a C, right? Because I've already kind of have an idea in my head about how I want this to work. So it's not like a lack of decision-making ability. It's the lack of asking questions to figure out what my process is. And this guy didn't do a very good job of that. So in those kinds of situations, that's where it's really important to know who you're selling to, right? Because if you're talking to someone who's very people driven and stuff like this, that's going to be easier, right? Because they might not have a process. They might not have the steps laid out in their mind. And so then it's just easy to be like, hey, should we do this? Absolutely. Whereas if you're dealing with someone like me or someone like Clint, who is very task driven and everything else, if you try to volley up a task that I don't see value in, and Clint probably feels the same way, I'm not going to do it. Right?
Yeah.
So to what you're saying, I think it's important in case the listeners don't know, and what we've talked about numerous times is when you're talking to a potential client or a client, you need to know where they're comfortable. So if you're an S and I'm talking to a D, I'm not going to go in there warm and fuzzy and, just is everybody, they don't want to talk about that. They just want to know, what are we doing? So it's super important to know who you are and who you're talking to. I mean, I know this is redundant, but I think it's just good to bring it up again.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is, with this whole crisis going on, is that most of your salespeople in the world fall in that I category, right? That's very traditional personality to have to get out in front of customers. So, the concern is that if you are a super I and you're killing it in sales in February of this year, you've just taken your biggest weapon out of your arsenal and thrown it in the trash can, which is getting in front of people and them liking you and you showing that personality side. It's really hard to do right now, right? And so this is where you've got to look around the spectrum and really pull the C into it. Hey, I need data and facts because I might have one shot at this. Who is the person I need to contact right now? Who's the best shot that I have? And that fact doesn't come from an I. That fact usually comes from your C's, your accounting department, your financial people, right? Or even some of your D's have a lot of that information because they collect that as well. But that's the thing, right? Is that if you've been successful before the crisis and then they shut off all communication, which is your biggest asset, how do you do it now, right? And you've got to teamwork this.
Well, one of the things, two things came to mind when you guys were talking. First of all, John, you're spot on. When somebody comes to sell to me, I want to know what their process is because I don't even have one, right? Most of the time. Now I have internal processes, but when you bring it to me, I'm like, well, tell me about your process. And then I'm capable of making a decision at that point, but I don't have an agenda many times. And back to Clint, when you said, with an I, some of our tools have been taken off the table, but that's when you use the ones that are still left to express yourself, right? Sure. Be you in this new medium, right? We're all having to find out who the new you is, right? Yeah. With some of these changes. And the new normal means that I's use their voice, use your, show your empathy, show your excitement in your words and in your conversations. And, maybe your hand gestures are taken away. Maybe some of it's shortened down. You don't have as much time as you had before. Whatever that may be, recognize it and then modify yourself. Because if you can't bend and you can't modify, you're going to be screwed. I don't care whether you're C, D, S, or an I.
Agreed.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of, we talked about this a long time ago. Man, it's probably been 7 or 8 months ago on a podcast. But, we talk about traditional salespeople a lot that, I take you golfing, you're my drinking buddy, so I buy from you. We talk about that a lot, but there are still a ton of traditional buyers out there that look for that, right? They don't know how to buy from somebody that doesn't show up like that. So both sides are in this predicament as well, right? And so of all times that you have to show value for what you do, it's now, right? What your product value is, what your customer service value is. That's probably most important right now, is that you're there when they call.
And you need to reach out and understand their pain, right? Because pain still exists, or you wouldn't be having the conversation. Something needs to either be fixed, or the potential is there for them to use you to solve an issue or a pain. So focus in on those key factors so that you're germane with your conversation. So what I hear you telling me is, and that's just an I summarizing, obviously, but make sure that you're not just going on the assumption that people still aren't traditional in the way that they hide the true pain. right? That just because we have COVID-19 doesn't mean I'm going to tell you that this is my real problem. I'm going to have some superficialness that can come through on a Zoom meeting, that can come through on the telephone. Well, no, we're doing okay. What do you got, right? That kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, those conversations are still going to hit with the people that are in the position to buy what you have. So go at it the traditional way. Just use some of the newer technology, or be prepared to do it at a distance.
Yeah,
6
I agree.
feet or more.
You know,
by the way, if you do get a face-to-face, stay 6 feet away. Be respectful of the freaking. I see too many. I'm like, you could stand 3 more feet apart. All right. You don't have to touch genitals to freaking get anything done. Stop it.
Well, the other thing that I would say is that, to that same point, is that we've all had to adjust and everything. And one of the things that I kind of held in my head was that there wasn't going to be a whole lot of business for me on Facebook, not a lot of prospects, not a lot of people in my target market. And I've been taking some of this time to kind of figure out if that was true and valid, or if I was just telling myself a story, because, you know, a lot of people talk about, you know, social selling, and some people say that social selling isn't really a thing and everything else. And, you know, there's so many private Facebook groups, right? And when you're really targeted and you hop into those groups, they're filled with your target market. So you can get in there, you have a captive audience, you can build some value, especially with like social posting and stuff like this, build some value, stuff like that, get into some conversations. And that is where the majority of my new leads have been coming from. I mean, both the pieces of business from this week have come from Facebook and not LinkedIn, which is where I traditionally spend the majority of my time. So take some of this time and really figure out, like, do the beliefs that you are operating under, are they actually serving you, or are you just taking them as canon and maybe you shouldn't? I think that is really important in these times whenever we're trying to adjust.
Agree.
Yeah, completely agree, John. That's a great topic. I actually just wrote it down on my daytimer here. You know, Facebook posts into those groups that will, you know, if you have some common ground, get involved with that so that
Absolutely.
your voice can be heard. And I think if you get, and I'm not very good at it. I think, John, you do a good job, much better than, but I'm only not good at it because I haven't done it enough times. It hasn't been something that I've had to really rely on. So it's like anything else. You're going to be rusty. You're not going to be just the whiz that some of these guys are, that's how they do most of their business.
Yeah.
But it still doesn't mean that you shouldn't really endeavor to be better at it and be good and see about, you know, is this a potential moneymaker? Because I think you really hit on a really interesting topic, because more and more people are going to those areas to get some information, to find out about their business environment or their associations. And I think it's a great way to interject yourself into a larger group.
Yeah, that's what I've been solely focused on. And, you know, at this point, you bring up a good point, is that this is a muscle, right? So by this point, I've written so many like value posts, you know, and thought provoking posts, or, you know, whatever, that kind of generate conversations and get people to reach out to me and stuff like that, that I can knock it out pretty quickly. But, you know, for the first month or 3 months or whatever, like it was a brutal process, like writer's block, and like, is this good enough and everything else. And sometimes as a C, we're not inclined to jump into action before it's proven and before it works, and sometimes before it's perfect. And so C's normally take a very long time to initiate anything new. And so finally I just had to just start hitting post, hit post, hit post, hit post, and then track, and then make adjustments as necessary. But there is, you know, when you public speak, you look like an expert in front of everybody there. Social media can be done the same way, right? You can create a Facebook group and put your target prospects in there, and so that way they are captive to you, right? And then you can give value, and you're not, you know, diluting your value to like the entire market and doing these things. But groups are where it's at. Not on LinkedIn, because I think that those are still dead, at least for now. But on Facebook, you can find a group about literally anything. And since my focus is working with like smaller digital marketing agencies, there's hundreds and hundreds of groups around Facebook ads and digital marketing, social media marketing. So I just hop in there, bring some value, talk about the stuff that I do and the things that I see from my clients, and then people start to reach out, which is kind of a good indicator of like, how big is your market, right? And how much can you do for somebody? But if you've not been successful doing social selling in the past, maybe take a look at it again, because more people are at home than they were in the past. And some of these people might be seeing stuff for the very first time. So don't necessarily count it out.
Yeah, I gotta throw one point in there from at least my industry is that you know I'm not in the same realm as you, John, at all, and what you're doing. But you know, the thing is, I almost look to that for guidance to steer away from, right? So when I see businesses that are usually my customers, because our customers are fishing for business as well, just like we are. So everybody from the top down is going through this. And the thing is when I see those companies that haven't skipped a beat, they're not fishing on social media. They're not posting stuff on
Sure.
LinkedIn. Those guys are just cruising through. So I'm focused on those guys, right? They figured out a way to make it work without changing anything. And I'm really shifted my focus to them. The other ones are indicators of people that are fishing and haven't figured it out, which in my business can extend stuff out to a year, right? So if I'm proposing stuff to somebody that's fishing today, I'm not going to see results for another year versus sticking with the people that are on track. So it's kind of a key indicator for me to stay away almost. So I caution you to look at your market and see what you think about your own trades.
That is a really good point, right? Because at some point you have to pull the trigger on something if it isn't helping you, right? I mean, continuing to invest time and money and effort into something that isn't providing you leads or results has got to be cold at some point, because otherwise why keep doing it? So I also think that because what I do is so drastically different than what you do, and the clients that we serve are so different, you're probably not going to see the same kind of response in conversations that I'm able to get into fairly easily, right? Like running in these groups is more productive for me than doing cold email or running ads, at least in the experiments that I've done so far. So if I can do that with zero marketing spend, right? I just have to extend like some sweat equity, then I'm okay to do that, because then eventually it just becomes a repeatable process with documentation. Then I can let somebody else do it. It's kind of the goal for me.
Yeah, and you know, just to be honest, it doesn't fit my personality at all. You know, being in the corner that I'm in, that is not something that's attractive to me. It's not something I'm going to put effort into, and maybe I should, right? Or find somebody on your team that does that well for you.
Yes.
And that's the biggest for me. If I was going to do this, it wouldn't be me that does it. It would be somebody that is, you know, probably a CS that actually cares to put content out there and actually wants results back. So for me, it's just it's a personal thing, but it's also an industry thing as well.
Yeah, there's a guy that I follow, and he has this whole program, and it's pretty cool actually, because it talks about this idea that not everybody wants to create the same kind of content, right? So not everybody wants to be on camera like this, you know, not everybody wants to write, not everybody wants to go do the public speaking route or something along those ways. But it was kind of cool to go through his assessment to figure out what kind of content creator I would be, because I like writing, obviously, but through taking the course, it shows up that I'm more leaning towards like this kind of thing, video and shorter and vocal, as opposed to all written, which is kind of interesting. But you know, you gotta, I think as we're getting more and more and more connected, you have got to be consistently putting out feelers, right, on these social media channels, especially if you think that that's where your decision makers are, right? I think it'd be really hard for anybody to target people in your target market, Clint, on Facebook. You know, that's going to be easier to do on LinkedIn.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely, you know, there's also a generation thing that we're talking about here too.
True,
so,
as well.
You know, there's you know, these younger project managers that are coming through the doors on our customer side. Hey, that's where they know how to get information. So if your information's not there, they go straight to the competitor that is, right? Absolutely. And that may be the sole decision process. So I think you got to hit all fronts, whether you do it personally or not. Your team has to do it. I'm truly believe that, because I will tell you, even when my team posts stuff on LinkedIn, a picture of something that we built, I think, what the hell are you taking a picture of that for? You did your job. Go home, you know? And that's
a little harsh.
But
I get it. But
isn't that in
that's
itself
what I'm saying.
A big deal, right? I mean, isn't that kind of like a big deterrent in your industry? Can these guys get this job done? Yeah, look at this photo. We get the job done.
Well, that's what I'm saying, right? I don't go deter my team from putting more stuff out there. I'm just not the guy to do that, right? I'm glad they do it. I'm glad it gets results, but it's not me, because I don't. Because to be honest with you, I wouldn't know what to take a picture of. honestly, if I walked
Just
out in our
give me a call.
but if I walked out in our shop right now and they built, some really cool platform, some people think that's probably a great achievement. I look at it and think, hey, you did exactly what we said we were going to do. This is no great feat. It's just got the job done. So it's just personality, man. I mean,
yeah,
it is what it is.
Well, I think we get stuck in these loops around ourselves, right? Because there's so many times where I'm like, oh, everybody's got to know what a CRM is at this point. And then I'll go talk to a client and they're like, what's a CRM? And I'm like, okay, wait a minute, So we kind of tell ourselves these stories, and sometimes the stories
that was me
relevant, right?
Because
because
all of us.
Exactly, because if your client, if their biggest pain point is lack of trust and can you get the job done, I'll take pictures of everything just to prove that we can do these things and function in different environments and everything else. In my realm, that's kind of hard because all I can really go off of is like testimonials and like social proof, right? Because like no one really wants to look at a screenshot of like a really in-depth CRM. Like it's not fun. I get that. So I wish that I had something that concrete that I could be like, hey, look how good I am.
Agreed. And the thing is like I get people that stop by that post this stuff, at least a couple times a day, like, hey, did you share my post on LinkedIn? I'm like, man, I didn't even look at it. And it's like, dude, all I need you to do is like it and share it. I don't care if you look at it or whatever. It's just getting the content out there. Yeah. And I have to trigger that in my brain to say, hey, you're right. John, you do it to me all the time. Like, hey, did you just share this, man? Just like this. And I'm like, okay, but you're giving me a task. I complete the task, no big deal, but I'm not going to feel compassionate about it. And you just everybody's just got to understand that, right? Is that I'm doing it for business reasons, not personal, versus somebody that puts it out there because they want gratification or they want to show everybody something cool. They're just very different reasons, and they're all wrong and right. It doesn't matter. But I think you got to look at the data coming back in and what you're doing, and whether it's social media or a CRM or who you're talking to. It's all data that you have to process and make a decision out of.
I think that's true. I mean, because we're looking at some options. We've taken some email lists. We're looking at ways to disseminate information and talk about the value in our clinic. And without the numbers, without looking back at the data and seeing what our responses are, then it can be a wasted endeavor if you don't have a process to go gather that information and decide, okay, given this much time, we haven't seen the results, or, oh, wow, the results have been overwhelming, right? And we've had a couple of those, those little programs that we've run through our clinic, and they've gone well so far. So, we're continuing to expand. So we did little things, and now we're going to do bigger things.
Sure.
Historically, I'm sorry, go ahead, Clint.
One of the things I noticed here recently, and I just I try to remember things that trigger, my, I guess, anger is what I would call it. But like somebody,
aren't you always angry?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, I'm definitely cynical. There's no doubt about that. But somebody sent a message the other day, and it said, "Hey, look at how your competitors are selling. They're using this tool. Check us out online." And I instantly will never go to your page, right? And me and you talk about this all the time, John, because you just sided with my competitors. You are an enemy of the state. See ya. You're done. You're dead to me. I know, but right. And the thing is, that message is not meant for me. You have to word that completely different. So, once again, cautious on what you put out there, because you might only be hitting 10% of the volume that you want to hit, but you might be hitting people that completely deter away from what you're trying to put out there. So you gotta be a little cautious.
And the thing is that like marketing used to be this very like flimsy construct of a business, right? It was like, newspaper ads and there wasn't really any way of like tracking anything. But now with digital marketing, it's the opposite. You can track everything. Like, I heard about something that could be really interesting for Al, right? So you can put up it's called the geofence, which is anytime anybody drives close enough to Al's clinic, you can then send them ads, but only if they've been within a certain amount of feet of the actual location. Like, that's crazy.
That's cool.
That is crazy.
Cool.
It is. I mean, it's big brothery as hell, right? And there's all kinds of problems with it. But from the business owner standpoint, that's awesome, right? If this person parked in my parking lot, I want them to see more ads so that way they come back. And then you don't have to spend and spray and pray to like everybody. It's just the people that were in that parking lot. I mean, it gets pretty granular and pretty crazy. And so sometimes when I talk to like business owners and they're like, oh yeah, I don't trust the digital marketing thing. It's like,
Oh, but if you hit it right, you can really exponentially get in front of so many more people.
Absolutely.
If you have the right message. And Clint just hit the nail on the head. If it's not the right message, you're not going to get them, particularly Clint, and then John, you hit on it. The guy went to sell to you the wrong way. And I know, Nan, it speaks to all of us that if your target market is a certain individual or type of individual, if you can focus in and then present the right message, it's not all about the focus, but it's all about the message as well, then now you've got somebody who engages you back. And when that happens, if you can do that enough times, you'll win. You'll win a certain segment of that market. Then the rest of it's on providing what you said you were going to provide and all the follow-up and all the rest of that. Sure. So don't forget that. But yeah,
and,
good
and we
stuff.
were just talking about this maybe a couple of weeks ago. We were talking about redoing our website and trying to, reclaim some of our Facebook and social media. We put together a small team here to do that. And, one of the things was this topic came up of how you word things, right? And, somebody made the comment, which is very right, is you can't word everything for everybody. And I said, I agree with you. You kind of got to pick your target market and chase it. However, there's people out there like, for example, like a Chick-fil-A, I think is what I brought up. They put a sign out that has a cow saying, eat more chicken. It doesn't offend anybody, right? The only people it offends is vegetarians, and you're not selling to those people anyway. So, things like that, it's just kind of, you just got to be, I'm not saying you got to be right for everybody, but what you do is you got to go after your target market, who you want to sell to, and make sure that you're hitting the hot points for them to come back and even give it a second glance. That's all.
And then the really important thing to that is the work you put into crafting like who your avatar is, right? That very specific person. And we did that whenever we were launching the show. Like that also pays double duty in your sales conversations, right? Because if you know that you sell at the mid-market to companies that have got X amount of revenue with X amount of employees and they've got these concerns, anybody who doesn't fit one of those things, you're going to have skepticism about. Right. Mm-hmm. And that skepticism is going to allow you to have a much better sales conversation because you're either going to get to a no quicker, which saves you time, or they put themselves into the spot to where they have to sell themselves to you because you're like, hey, I'm not, Clint, based upon what we talked about so far, you're not dealing with any of the stuff that I normally help people with. What were you hoping I could do for you? Right. And you get to have such a better conversation because on paper, this doesn't make sense. You're not in the people that I normally help. Like what are you hoping I could do? Right. But you don't get to do that when you're just trying to sell to everybody. Right. Because there's some overlap here. Right. There's this saying in marketing that when you try to market to everybody, you're not actually marketing to anybody. And the same thing happens in sales. When you're trying to sell to everybody, you're not selling to anybody. Right. So there's room for that work into like the targeting to play double duty if you go through the process and do it the right way.
I agree. No, I think that's a good point.
Awesome.
All right.
So Clint has got some golf to go hit up.
Wow. All right.
He's working hard today. But thanks everybody for tuning in. We will hopefully have the technical difficulties figured out for next time. If not, hop on the email list so that way you can be in the Zoom here, ask your questions, and so that way we can try to help you with what is going on in your world and not just talk about what's going on in ours. If you're watching this on YouTube, like and subscribe. And if you know anybody else in sales who is struggling, share this with them. If you want to take the assessment to figure it out, we're having a lot of people reach out to us because it's getting a little bit harder. So they're investing a little bit into figuring out how they can improve. So we have these assessments. You can either just take the test and get the results, or you can take the assessment and one of us will hop on a call and go over it with you. Email disc@salesthrowdown.com and we'll get you hooked up. But we'll see everybody next week. Be safe and see you later.
See you guys. Be safe. Bye-bye.